Okaeri, welcome back to my channel, May Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to be doing my March wrap-up. Now, I had a really good reading month in March. Not just in star ratings, but in the amount I was able to read. I finished a total of 9 books, with a 10th one being in process by the end of the month. So I'm pretty happy with that. And the fact that a lot of them were physical reads, although very ebook heavy, still physical reads makes me really, really happy. There was a while there where physical reading was super slow and just was not working for me, so I'm really happy to report that I'm getting back into the swing of things, finally. As I mentioned, this was a very ebook heavy month for me, so I'm going to be holding up my Kindle a lot. But the first book that I finished in March was Death's Beating Heart. This is the 5th book in The War Eternal by Rob J. Hayes, and I do have spoiler-free, kind of in-the-moment thoughts in my most recent vlog if you wanted to go check that out. But by the nature that it's the 5th book in the series, I can't really go into major plot points without spoilers and, giving big plot points away. In the same vein, I can't really talk about characters because I don't want to give away who lives or dies throughout the series. But just know that this is the best way that I could have seen Eska's story ending. I don't know what I expected the end to be to that story, but this matched that perfectly. It fits who she is as a person, it fits the story up until this point, and I was really, really satisfied with the ending here. The final battle scene is also everything that we were promised. Gruesome, brutal, just chef's kiss. Could not put it down during those scenes. But if you don't know, a general overview of The War Eternal, starting with Along the Razor's Edge, the first book, we follow Eska, or Eskara Helsin, as she is captured and put into a prison, the worst prison that you can imagine, called the Pit. She was trained to be a sorcerer for her nation, basically a weapon for her nation in this war that they were fighting, but then her country loses the war and she gets captured as a prisoner after they lose. And we follow her as she navigates her way through the pit. Eska's narrative voice is very strong and distinct, and quite edgy. So I think you'll know within the first couple chapters if this series is for you or not. But if you find yourself really connecting with and jiving with her narrative voice, then I would highly recommend the series. The writing is wonderful, the character work is phenomenal, and the plot never goes where you think it's going to go. You think you might have something figured out, but let me promise you, you don't. Either way, I ended up giving the end of Eska's story a 4.5 stars. The second book I read was via audio, and that is The Conductors. I expected to love this book. The cover always caught my attention whenever I saw it, and it had been kind of on my radar for a really long time. And I've mentioned a couple times on my channel recently that I am in my mood reading era. And so when I saw that my library had this book available, I jumped on it and I said, why not? Why not finally pick up this book that always seems to catch my attention? Unfortunately, this one didn't quite work for me. I loved the atmosphere, the setup, and the concept of this story. We follow our 2 main characters who in the past helped fellow slaves escape on the Underground Railroad using innate magic that they have. And now they've settled into a town and act as kind of the unofficial detectives for the local population. So people will come to them when they have a problem, when someone goes missing, when they're worried about something, and these 2 characters will investigate. I love whodunit stories, and I was so intrigued by the idea of a magic system that's based in star sigils, which you can kind of see on the cover of the book as well, that's hinted at. You know I love me a good, fascinating magic system. And it doesn't have to be a hard magic system. A soft magic system is fine. But unfortunately, in this book, this magic system was used so frequently as a reveal or a plot point that I needed to know more about it for those reveals to make any sense to me. So, for example, they would find a body that would have a specific sigil on the body, and they would explain what that sigil meant, but not how it was connected to other aspects of this magic system and why I should be surprised to see it. So I felt like those reveals and those plot points held no meaning for me. I was just like, oh, okay, I guess that's a piece of information I have now. But I think it was supposed to have more of a shocking aspect to it, some kind of reveal. And I never really felt that way. And because of that, I also didn't feel that the stakes were high. I was never really concerned for our characters because it felt like magic could fix any issue that came up. So if someone was in a sticky situation, suddenly there's a magic spell or incantation that can be used to reverse this situation. But I didn't know the rules, so I didn't really know why that was the case. So it made the stakes feel very, very low to me. And it was also a bit confusing because there's apparently two systems of magic here. There's sorcery and then the sigil magic. And sorcery is considered bad, but we never really... I felt like we never really completely understood why. I don't know. I just could not connect to that aspect of this world. And it was such a big part of it that I felt that really detracted from my enjoyment. The atmosphere was fantastic, though. I could picture everything perfectly, very well fleshed out, and I found the setting extremely intriguing. I also really liked the way that the characters interacted with each other. I love when very disparate personalities are forced to work together in like a friend group or whatever to achieve a goal, and that feeling was here, which I did thoroughly enjoy. However, the characters themselves, individually, I didn't really care for them. Not care for them, that's not the right word. I don't mind unlikable characters at all, but I didn't care about them. Maybe because the stakes felt low as well. I just wasn't invested, really. The main thing that kept me going was I wanted to know the whodunit aspect of this book. And there were some plot points that seemed a bit too convenient in the whodunit aspect, but it was enough to keep me reading until the end. So that plot thread was really nice to have in there as well. Overall, I gave this book 3 stars because I don't think it's a badly written book. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the story per se, but there were just a couple elements of the story that weren't developed in a way that I enjoy as a reader, or as in depth as I enjoy as a reader. So for me, this ended up being just a solid 3 stars. The next book I read, however, hit all of the points that I adore, and that was Small Miracles by Olivia Atwater. I read this for Spiffbo, and usually I hold off on sharing my feelings about the Spiffbo books. One, because we haven't released, the final score on Before We Go blog, and 2, because I'm going to do a full video of all of the finalists when I read them all. But this one has already been released on Before We Go blog, and I just want to talk a little bit about it because I loved it so much. Spoiler alert. This was delightful. If The Good Place and Bad Omens had a baby, it would be this book. It has the exact same type of humor as The Good Place, and it has that irreverent narration that Good Omens had. And for me, this worked better than Good Omens because I understood all of the references and the jokes in this book. And that's not the fault of Terry Pratchett or Neil Gaiman. It was just for the generation above mine, so not getting those references is just a fact of life. But with this book, all of those references hit, and I laughed out loud so many times while reading this book. It brought me so much joy. I initially read it via ebook, and then I got a physical copy because I knew I had to have one on my shelves, and I transferred my tabs over. Yellow means laughter, so you can see that there's quite a few moments of laughter in here. So not only was this a joyful and fun ride, but the end really brings it home with this message of enjoying each day. And it's the little things that add up to make life what it is. And it was wonderfully written. I did end up giving this 4.5 stars rather than 5 stars because of one thing that once I noticed I couldn't unnotice. And that's that a lot of cozy fantasy tends to latch onto a comfort food to set like the vibes of the story and to bring that cozy feeling to the reader. And unfortunately, this book latched on a little too strongly to chocolate. I should have really tracked how many times the word chocolate was used in this book. I think it would have been an absurd number. And while I do think that chocolate is a very good choice for a comfort food to use in a book like this, once you started noticing how much it was mentioned, it was kind of hard to unsee that, and it started kind of annoying me rather than bringing me that cozy feeling by the end. So I do think that it was used well as a plot device actually at one point in this story. And I wouldn't take out the idea of chocolate. I would just lessen the amount that we see it referenced here. I said I was going to talk about general thoughts and then I went way into it, so that's my review for this. Spoiler for the review video for the Spiffbo books, but I adored this book and I will definitely be rereading it. Now the next 3 books were audios for me. It's the 3 novellas from Skyward Flight, which are between Starsight and Cytonic in that series. And, well, actually, the first 2 novellas are between Starsight and Cytonic. And then the third one, which I didn't know until after I read it, was that one's supposed to be read after Cytonic. But I read all 3 already. So the damage is done. So we'll see if that's a spoiler for Cytonic when I finally pick it up. But the reason I picked these up is that I pulled Cytonic from my TBR jar. And then I realized before I read it that you were supposed to read the novellas from the Skyward Flight before picking that up. So I decided to kind of switch what my TBR reads were, my jar reads for that month. And so I read these instead. And then this coming month in April, I plan to actually read Cytonic. These novellas were a fun time. I really enjoyed myself. I gave all 3 of them a solid 3.5 stars. I'm not as invested in the characters in this series as I am in other things Sanderson has written, such as the Cosmere. So I didn't feel super big emotional impacts, I think, when I was supposed to, but I still really liked the world building here and the spaceship battles. I never expected to like spaceship battles, but the way they're written in this series is so intriguing. I can't take my eyes off the page when they're happening, or press the stop button and stop listening when they're happening. They're written in a really engaging way, so I thoroughly enjoyed those. And like I said, the expansion of the worlds. In each book, we get to see a different planet and different people living on that planet. And that is something that Sanderson always excels at. Diving into the intricacies of different societies and how those will come into play when they interact with each other. It's just something he excels at, and that was something that was very much present in all 3 of these novellas. Like I said, I gave them all 3.5 stars. I enjoyed my time, and I'm excited to move on to Cytonic. The next book was also an audio, and one that I crushed in one day, and that was the only good book club pick for the month, which was Notes on an Execution. This was compulsively readable. I was so addicted to this story, I could not put it down for the life of me. The middle of it felt a little bit long, but it wasn't enough to get me to stop listening, and I crushed this entire audio in one day because I could not stop listening to it. We follow the story of a serial killer on the day of his execution, and I really liked how the author played with different points of view and perspectives in the story. So sometimes they would tell the story as if you were the serial killer. So it would say, you wake up on the day of your execution, you feel this, you feel that, in order to get you into the mind of the serial killer that we're learning about. But they also show the points of view of, flashbacks into the past and the people that are researching why he does what he does, and even the victims as well. And I just really liked how the author played with different points of view. I thought it kept it very engaging, and that was part of the addicting aspect of the book, is you never knew kind of what you were going to get in the next section. So I really did enjoy that. But as I mentioned, there was a lull in the middle where I feel like some of the points of view were stretched out too long, and we didn't get any extra information from being in that point of view anymore, and it was time to shift, I think. But overall, I had a really good time with this book. Really good time is a hard word to use here. I love true crime, okay? I love things that have that vibe to it, and this very much had that vibe. So I don't think fun time is the right word, but it is something that I enjoyed the reading process of. It does delve into a lot of heavy themes and topics, such as cycles of violence, abuse, trauma, things that are not light to read about, but I do think they're handled with care. And I would be interested in rereading this book, I think, physically in the future, so it might be one that I purchase for my shelves. The next book I read was On Lavender Tides, again on my Kindle. This is a book that wears its inspiration on its sleeve. It's very upfront about the fact that it's inspired by Pokemon, and it's basically Pokemon for those who grew up with the games and a more adult version of that. I do think it's shelved as YA on Goodreads. I had initially thought it was middle grade, and I was incorrect there. I do think it's YA. And there's, some curse words in here. It's definitely not rated G exactly like the original Pokemon series is, because the creatures that battle each other do shed blood and things like that. But overall, I did have a really fun time with this book. However, it took me a lot longer to read than it should have. I was really struggling with one of the main characters here. Her motivations and her desires seemed really inconsistent and underdeveloped. So whenever I got her perspective, I had a really hard time kind of grounding myself in the pages and trying to understand why she did what she did. Maybe she'll be more developed in later books, I'm not really sure. But considering we only get 2 main points of view, that was about 50% of the book that I was like, I'm not really connecting here. So that did hinder my enjoyment. There were also just some points in the story where I felt my attention wandering and I couldn't really tell you why. Everything about the environment and the creatures that we were discovering was so much fun, so I don't really know why I was having that issue, but it just took me a lot longer to read than I expected. So overall, I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. I will definitely continue with the series. I know there's a second and a third book so far, and I will definitely be continuing on because I had a really good time. But this one didn't quite meet all of the expectations that I had for it. My battery is dying, of course. I really need to purchase another battery for this camera. So while I could talk about this last book for just ages, I'm gonna just say a small piece here, and that is Jade City by Fonda. This is a reread. I decided that I was gonna make more time for rereads this year, and an opportunity presented itself perfectly when Philip Chase asked if I wanted to be part of a read-along on his channel, where he's reading it for the first time along with Jimmy from the Fantasy Network, and then myself and Bookborn, who have already read the entire series, are joining them for lives to talk about them as we read them. So if you want to hear more in-depth thoughts about reasons why I love this book, spoilery and non-spoilery, I will make sure to link the chat that we had about Jade City over on Philip's channel down below, because we had that a couple days ago and it was phenomenal. So you can hear more of my thoughts there. I also have a full review for this book that you can check out, but I also scream about it on my channel all the time. But upon reread, I love it just as much. No one is surprised. This is 5 glowing stars from me. And I don't really know how I can express my love for this series any more than I do. There's the ridiculous and embarrassing amount of tabs in this book. All of the characters are just as wonderful and well developed the first time through. Lan, Shay, and Hilo just have my heart. Well, some of them have my heart. The one thing I will say that really improved upon reread was my reflections on the political aspects of this book. Because I know where it goes in the future, I kind of knew what to pay attention to, and it didn't feel as overwhelming the first time through. And that was, my enjoyment of that aspect of this book was increased even more, and my respect for Fonda and the groundwork she did in this first book for the second 2, just, it's phenomenal, the work she did here. So if you haven't read the Greenbone Saga, do it. Please do it. It's a phenomenal piece of fantasy, and I think everyone can get something out of this series. I'm also 15% of the way through Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. Don't have full thoughts on this yet, as I'm still very much at the beginning of this audiobook, but I love the Remnant Chronicles by Pearson, and the writing is working for me just as it did in that first trilogy, so I'm going to continue on with that in April. Let me know in the comments down below, what did you read in March? What are you currently reading? I'd love to chat with you guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell. I'd love to have you as part of this community, and I appreciate it. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Jane!